you know, pretty quick runs themselves. So I think the thing about Ambition's position here is that, like, I mean, it's so tough because if you don't skip Sagadon, there's a good chance your run is around the same time as Obey Alliance, and it's going to come down to just minor efficiency things. And if you do try and execute that skip, then all of a sudden your run is faster, but way more dangerous. And it's just a question of, like, do you want to roll those dice?
That's right. Obey Alliance, Ambition vying for that final spot. Going up in Sanguine Depths here for a rematch between both those teams. Let's get into it.
All right, so we know that straight away both of these teams are going to be one of those really crazy pulls, even though we know that I think Obey Alliance is going to do a slightly bigger pull as they're going to get that Brute in. Never mind, Ambition is doing the same thing as they're also gathering up the Brute, Nerf dropping incredibly low just right before he leaped back to that Lantern. Let's see whichever team is going to get that pull done quicker. It looks like that Mist Dancer is taking quite a long time for Ambition to get in though, as he was just standing still casting there in the back.
Yeah, that mob is completely immune to crowd control effects, if I'm not mistaken, so you're just at the mercy of waiting for it to actually make its way into the pull. Both teams, though, have got everything grouped up in that Venthyr Lantern, so they will be getting those stacks of that buff. Looks like Obey Alliance are having a better job here of dealing their damage to everything more efficiently, right? So these things should die a little bit ahead of schedule because, like you mentioned, that Mist Dancer, which Ambition have marked with a skull, is going to die a little bit slower. You could see, though, that they were putting some prior damage into it. That's why they put the skull marker on it, to try and minimize the impact of that.
Yeah, and now both teams are using that Shroud, making sure they are going past this Tormentor here on the left, because they have that buff from the Lantern. You can see that red glow around their characters, having a huge damage increase from that Venthyr Covenant, and now they want to go immediately into the boss because they're pulling all of this trash on top of the boss as well. And you can see just how much AoE damage is going to come out of that Ashen Hallow that the Paladins have saved. And then also just all of those procs. Look at 40. 40 really just prayed to the RNG gods as he's just doing so much damage to the Obey Alliance's side.
Meanwhile, Azuna on the side of Ambition also carrying the damage here, in large part due to that Night Fae Covenant ability that he has access to. Notably, Zorthus on the side of Obey Alliance instead optimizing a little bit more for single target damage with that Venthyr choice instead. And you can see that even though he's doing a lot less overall, Crixus the Voracious is a little bit lower health on the side of Obey Alliance, perhaps because of that extra single target they're getting there.
Yeah, very possible. The difference in Covenant choices here for the Frost Mages, we've already seen that before in dungeons like the Other Side, where some mages go for more AoE and others go for more single target, and really has pros and cons in both. You can see Ambition catching up a little bit on boss percentage, but it is tyrannical, so each percentage is quite a lot of HP, and neither of the teams decided to pull that Tormentor into the boss. That is something we've seen them do before, but this time around neither of the teams are doing that. So once Crixus is dead, they're gonna have to go back and deal with that Tormentor, unless they want to deal with that fire damage dot on the last boss.
Which
and I don't think that is
don't.
gonna happen. Yeah.
Another interesting difference here between builds, we've actually seen this out of Lagbug before, is a little bit more. Actually, no, not for this one. Okay, the two Paladins are on pretty much the same game plan this time. Previously, we've seen Lagbug play a little bit more of like a raid-style build in dungeons like Mist, but here he has gone in for that full damage, as well as Ellesmere, so you can see both Holy Paladins dealing 15,000 DPS as this boss is reaching the end of its health. Just completely absurd damage numbers for those healers, as they're kind of angling now to get started with this next pull. Ambition have actually squeezed out a little bit more damage, so despite pulling the boss a little bit later, they are going to kill it a couple seconds ahead of schedule here. Meanwhile, Obey Alliance killing the boss a little bit later, but look, both teams are starting the Incinerator pull at the same time because Obey Alliance moved the boss to this part of the room right before finishing it, whereas Ambition had to run for a little bit after the boss died.
Yeah, and Ambition going into this pull with 2% extra trash compared to Obey Alliance. I do believe they might have pulled like one extra tick into the boss the Obey Alliance is dealing with now on this trash pull. You can see Ambition actually having a amount of AoE damage, dealing with this so quickly. So even though they pulled it at the same time, it just exploded. Once you can see the damage meter just completely annihilating this pack, as Obey Alliance just now is getting it done and still having that Brute up as well. That's probably the one thing that Ambition pulled into the boss. They had a double Brood, while Obey Alliance only had a single Brood pulled into the boss.
Wow, the damage from Onesie there, just completely absurd from the Windwalker. Definitely the Dance of Chi-Ji is smiling upon Ambition in this one. They're now getting started with another big pull. This one's actually quite scary with the double Inspiring Aura. You just have no way to stop any of these casts that are coming out, and you can see everybody's health bars are going to start being attacked on the side of Ambition. A rough quaking coming out as well as everything is dying. Ellesmere, though, doing a good job of keeping everybody okay. Dwarf Racial being used to remove that debuff. Obey Alliance getting started with the same pull.
Yeah, that Inspiring definitely not helping out here as he cannot interrupt any of those Oppressor casts that are doing a huge amount of damage to their group, as well as just not having any sort of AoE stuns that can help out the tanks either. You can see Nerf did already proc that cheap death on his side, while Skylark still has that available for him on a Bay Alliance side. But Ambition, because they just dealt with this Tormentor pull earlier so much quicker than Obey Alliance, they're already done here, and that now they're gathering up that Overseer, double Overseer pack with the inside pack as well, with all of those Oppressors. Surely there's going to be some inspired mobs here too, so lots of AoE damage required here to make sure they can get this done. Ashen also being committed here by Ellesmere.
Another cool build difference between these two teams is they're both starting off a massive Venthyr Lantern pool actually is on their tanks. Nerf is playing that Kyrian Demon Hunter legendary, which I haven't seen anybody use before, but is the extra soul fragments and a bunch of stats after you hit Elysian Decree, which is something that they have on a fairly short cooldown, especially with that Forge Light Soulbind tree. And so you can see Nerf gets quite a bit of value out of that. Skylark instead, on the more traditional Fell Devastation, has a chance to not incur its cooldown and give you the Fury back legendary.
Wow, I think Ambition actually adapted their strategy here, because if I'm not completely mistaken, I think this was Obey Alliance strategy. They were the ones that pulled Baruth into the next trash area and just skipped that mini-boss. And I think Ambition adapted to this strategy now as well, as they are pulling this this Tormentor into the Warden, and you can see Obey Alliance doing that same thing. So interesting to see that Ambition adapted to Obey Alliance strategy, even though they had a different one when they played against each other last time. Maybe they changed it up because they were the ones losing against Obey Alliance, so they must have reworked their route and see what Obey Alliance did different.
Yeah, the thing is, when you actually play against another team and you lose to them, you do want to test what they're doing, right? And see, like, okay, is there any part of their route that's just better than ours? And so you just run and you test it, and eventually you can find these things where it's like, oh yeah, this is just 30 seconds faster, like we should just be doing this, right? Some things instead are a little bit harder to adapt, right? Stuff like playing the Affliction Warlocks that some teams use in this dungeon, that would require a full overhaul of the path. But Ambition can basically do the same dungeon strategy as before and change like 2 or 3 pulls and have those advantages if they find them to be a time save. Other times you lose to a team and you're like, actually, our strategy is still better, we just executed it badly. But this time it definitely seems like Ambition has put in the time to test the Obey Alliance differences in pathing.
Yeah, and it seems to be working out great for Ambition as they dealt with this so quickly. They did pick up that the other Lantern buff as well. You can see all of those glows around their characters again. So they want to be carrying this buff into the next Lantern. You can see over there that is going to be activated in just a second. Once they pull all of this trash back, you can see Nerf jumping back to the Lantern, Ellesmere opening up the Lantern, and now they're going to be refreshing that duration of the buff. And they want to keep it for the boss. That's going to be the important part. They want to make sure that no one goes down here at this point, because they want to keep that buff on all of the DPS, importantly, to make sure that the boss is going to be nice and easy for them to deal with.
Wow, Skylark, great play on that Vengeance Demon Hunter, barely preventing his cheat death from being procced. Does have to use Fell Devastation, so he won't have it for the start of the pull here. But still, look at them grouping everything up here beautifully, using that little line of sight spot right around the corner there. They've now got all of the mobs beautifully in range of that Venthyr Lantern, which has already been opened. This will be a refresh of their buffs, and then a bunch of new ones. Meanwhile, Nerf on the side of Ambition getting started with the boss here, as they also have a bunch of stacks of that damage amp. And look at Onesie just blowing up all these mobs. JPC, though, the man himself on the rogue, also doing a lot of damage here. Black Powder, he's been given the permit to cast Black Powder on this one, not just required to hit only Eviscerates, and there he goes.
Unfortunately, 2 people did get hit by that beam, and Asuna decided to dispel himself instead of dispelling 1C. Good choice, as he's the one doing more damage than the damage meter as well. So very, very well done by Asuna. As they have to finish up the Scribe Soul in the corner that is throwing research at them, but looks like it's not a high priority at the moment, as they're still focusing Torvald and also the manifestation that spawns that does a huge amount of AoE damage to the group on top of this Castigate as well. Lagbak actually committing the Ashen here in comparison to Ellesmere holding it for the next boss probably. So interesting difference here in strategy. Not sure if this was something that they maybe decided on the fly. Maybe they didn't have enough offensive cooldowns, or they think that the boss would have lasted too long without that Ashen Hollow being committed by Lagbak. But that means the next boss is going to be quite a lot more difficult for Obey, because that next boss, they're not going to have the buff anymore, and they're also not going to have Bloodblast they want to use. So there's so much incoming damage that they have to deal with without that Ashen Hollow available in the Paladin.
Yeah, both teams, though, I mean, with the commitment of those resources, you can see that Obey Alliance have really caught up on this boss, and they are actually going to be killing this boss right at the exact same time as each other. So now less than 1 second separating these two teams, the exact same percent as well, but crucially, Ellesmere has Ashen Hallow available and Lagbug does not. So I would give an advantage right now, just the tiniest advantage, to Ambition as they get started with this trash into boss pull. So do Obey Alliance, though the exact same pull. They will not have Ashen Hallow for this. Is Ellesmere going to send it here? Maybe going to hold it for a little bit so to get some more healing, and there it goes. It's cast right now into this big damage explosion from the boss.
It looks like his wings weren't up just yet. Now the wings are back though, so I hope he's going to be popping those wings in just a second on Ellesmere's side. As Obey Alliance, of course, does not have that Ashen available, so they're going to have to deal with this trash without that extra cooldown. And you can see just how much damage comes out in this group while the boss is casting that AoE, and then a lot of tank damage as well with those Iron Spikes coming out. They do have this one Oppressor that is inspired to seat in the corner next to Sogodon, you can see for both of those groups. So they're going to be pulling that in just a second whenever they feel like they are somewhat safe on those HP pulls.
So Ellesmere actually has just popped his wings now. He didn't need to do it for so long because he got back-to-back Awakening procs. Awakening is one of the talents that Holy Paladins use these days that gives them a 15% chance on Word of Glory or Light of Dawn to get wings for 10 seconds. And so Ellesmere, he was just sitting there in wings without having to actually press that button. That's going to mean his entire Ashen Hallow was wingsed up. And you can see on the damage meters the benefits of the Ashen Hallow and the wings, although a little bit less than usual because, you know, a lot of healing needed to be done on this pull as well. Couldn't just go full damage.
It's actually very interesting because look, if you look at the boss's HP, Obey Alliance actually a little bit ahead at this point, even though Ambition seemed to be having more of these offensive cooldowns with the Ashen. So maybe because Ellesmere had to heal so much, because this boss does so much AoE damage, that's why maybe Obey Alliance made the more efficient choice of using the Ashen on their previous boss, maybe getting more damage out there compared to using the Ashen here. So this is a very interesting, a small difference it seems like, but the Obey Alliance was behind for a couple of seconds before they committed the Ashen on the previous boss, and Ambition didn't catch up that time that with the Ashen on this boss. So slight difference in cooldown usage, and it seems to be in favor of Obey Alliance.
Yeah, notably Obey Alliance will have their next Ashen available sooner. I wonder how many more casts there will be left in this dungeon. Probably 2 if you're Obey Alliance, right? If you hit that button on cooldown, you probably get it on the last boss. Whereas Ambition may be in a position where they only get 1 more Ashen Hallow for the entire dungeon. Obey Alliance wasting no time getting started with Sogodon, and Ambition also making an audible from their strategy that lost against Obey Alliance earlier in this tournament, and deciding to pull Sogodon instead of trying to deal with the last boss with that physical damage taken increase. A very understandable decision. It would take an immense amount of self-confidence to be able to send that strategy that lost the last time again. I'm sure they would do it if they thought it was right, but I think that when that happens, you kind of are like, okay, actually, this is just not, it's not consistent enough for us.
Yeah, one more thing to note here is that Lightbug just now got his Ashen back when Sogadon was at like 40% HP. And I wonder if it maybe would have been the right choice to just pop it in case, just so he gets it back on the last boss. Because I'm not sure if the time is going to be enough for him to use it on that first pull here and then again on the last boss. Not sure if there's going to be quite 4 minutes in between those two. So we will see about that later on, as both of those teams now use that Shroud to go past this trash and directly go into this gauntlet, making sure they use as much focus target damage as possible on General Call.
Yeah, getting started with this big pull. You can see on the side of Obey Alliance, they use the extra action button right on pull. You can do that, right? And it will come back by the time the first Bloom Burst comes around. And in fact, if you're pushing General Call fast enough, you can actually just use it whenever, because she will never get to that cast. Both teams, though, are doing basically the exact same thing as each other, and I cannot overstate just how close this game is so far. Obey Alliance have pushed General Call below 80% or below 90% here. Ambition actually a little bit slower on this check. Zhuen has been popped here by Onesie. It's just about to expire as they are now making their way to the second pull. So I would say maybe something like 5 seconds in favor of Obey Alliance here. Both Paladins holding on to that Ashen Hallow. There will be one more Ashen Hallow this dungeon.
Yeah, this is so incredibly close. They are now close to this last lantern of the dungeon. You can see on the right-hand side for both of those teams. They want to be using that lantern buff for the last boss. Both of these teams are going to be pulling some trash into the last boss with those with the one Tormentor debuff that they didn't do, so it's only going to be the 50% slow that they have to deal with in the last boss. No other Tormentor debuffs are going to be there, but they still want to have that Lantern buff there just to get through that huge amount of HP on the last boss, because it is 22 Tyrannical. So now they're going to gather up that pool. You can see the tanks are running ahead on both sides, making sure to pull all of that trash backwards to activate that Lantern and get that buff onto the group.
Yeah, you can see the opening cast from both teams as those lanterns open up at right about the same time as each other. The entire pull now getting grouped up here. Again, Obey Alliance have something like 5 seconds extra here. Both teams, though, do have an extra caster that they can't quite hit all of them with the Sigil of Silence, and so they need to kick one of them in. And it's all going to come down to who can get done with this pull first, and then also who can execute the last boss better.
Yeah, then one more thing to note is that the Obey Alliance actually had to pull a bet into this pool to get enough percentage, while Ambition somehow didn't need to do that. They got a little bit of extra percentage somewhere else in the dungeon, so they didn't have to focus a bet down here. But Obey Alliance still dealing with this quicker. They are now done. They have those buffs, they have the Bloodlust available. They're going to be getting into the last boss pool in just a second, and we'll see if it goes right. But it's so close between the two.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
0 deaths on both sides, so there's no time penalty on either of those teams. So we'll see how they execute this last pull.
Yeah, this is probably going to be our best run of Sanguine Depths of the weekend, barely beating our second best run as both teams get into the boss room. The Ashen Hallows will be coming down shortly. Obey Alliance are going to be the first to pull the boss there, popping every single cooldown in existence and their time warp as well. Meanwhile, Ambition getting the exact same thing going, and it's just going to be about damage. It's going to be about General Call boss damage. All of these ads, all this extra stuff, that's just a distraction. That will die, but they need to focus as much single target as possible. And you can see it's actually Ambition that hit the 63% mark, a hair ahead of where Obey Alliance are at. So somehow Ambition have found a little bit more damage onto this boss. They still have to get all the way to 50% though, and this is such a tiny lead, but it does appear to be growing a little bit for Ambition. 58 to 60 are the two boss health totals now. Obey Alliance need to find some extra little bit of gas here to catch back up.
Yeah, Ambition somehow just finding so much single target damage on this pull. Looks like they just used a lot more onto the boss, while maybe Obey Alliance was focusing a little bit more on killing that trash that they pulled with the boss. And it looks like Ambition is close to 2% ahead on the boss now. And on a 22 Tyrannical on General Call, that is quite a lot. I'm not sure what kind of miracle happened for Ambition, but this is so important for them. It's so close between those two. Look at the boss health. I'm just staring at the numbers, looking at who is going to be able to get General Cal down quicker. And it looks like there's only 2% left for Ambition because of course, this boss dies at 50%. And the Obey Alliance just not managing to get to the same amount of single target DPS quite. Wow. Okay, so Ambition did get the boss down, and what a run! I mean, look at the amount of damage they're doing. Crazy. Wow.
That is just a straight damage difference on the boss. Obey Alliance still hasn't taken it down yet. Look at this. This is actually ridiculous. Only in the MDI are you going to see a gauntlet that the teams are just call, waiting for her to hit her next checkpoint so they could just burn her health down all over again. What a fantastic game here in Sanguine Depths between Ambition and Obey Alliance. But of course, the former gonna be taking it as they continue their revenge run here, Tettles.
Yeah, Ambition was able, they adapted their strategy so much from yesterday. Their route was a lot different from what they were playing yesterday, whether it was at the beginning of the first boss or like at the end where they played the boss without the Sagadon debuff, which it looked like that was probably the best play. They ended up running a mirrored route to Obey Alliance, which, you know, I thought they were going to lose, and I thought it was going to be a really bad call to play basically the exact same route as their competition there.
Hey, I mean, all you got to do is just do more damage, simply, Dreadnoughts. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is incredible. Looking at the damage meters here, it's hard to tell where the difference was, right? Like, I guess Azuna dealt 3,000 more DPS than Zorthus, but 40 dealt an extra 1,000 compared to 1Z. JPC was coming in big there.
It's just JPC diff.
Yeah, is this the JPC diff? It's hard to say, because, like, yeah, I mean, it's just also close numbers-wise. I think the important thing is less how much damage was dealt and more where that damage was dealt, how it was prioritized, how it was being put into the focus targets, because that is really what speeds up these keys.
Yep, and, you know, not to mention, you know, JPC had a tweet about 3 weeks ago talking about the difference in monks high-rolling some Chi-G procs and everything like that against each other, and was saying Onesie did a little more damage on that last pull in particular, especially looking at how quickly all those ads got burned down and everything. So extremely impressive either way for these guys, and Tettles, take it away. I mean, these highlights are just phenomenal.
So whenever we were, like, before the match, I was talking about how Ambition was going to pull Incinerator Arcoleth into Crixus, and them not doing that really threw me off guard. I think that they should have still committed to pulling Incinerator into Crixus. That feels like that's just a substantially better pull in the meta. However, it is a 22, so some of those mobs could become problematic. They may just have consistency issues. There was a death on that pull yesterday, so maybe that's the reason they scrapped it. This was the pull. So Ambition did the exact same pulls you see that Obey Alliance is doing right here, and this is what threw me off the most, because Ambition didn't do this pull yesterday. Whenever Ambition was pulling Execution, they pulled him with the Javeliner and all of the surrounding trash, whether that be the Overseer and whatnot. So them adapting that pull, I was not a big fan of that. I felt like they were going to be able to pull just a little bit faster, and Obey Alliance was able to catch back up due to them running such a similar route. And we saw, even going into the last boss, both of these teams were within 2-3 seconds of one another, with Obey Alliance being slightly favored on that front. And Ambition somehow kills General Call in the range of like 20 to 30 seconds ahead of Obey Alliance. I must admit, that one's a bit of a question mark for me. I don't really know how that happened, where Obey Alliance just felt like they came to such a standstill and Ambition was able to just punch all the way through. I think it probably just came down to maybe it was something like Chi-G procs, like you were talking about, getting all that trash dealt with. And so you had your cooldowns effectively running for longer, and you're able to just get the boss down just a tad bit sooner.
It's such a rare thing to see, that because usually when we say that teams are copying other teams' strategies, we usually talk about the fact, I mean, you can copy someone's strategy, but if you're copying, you're not going to do it as fast as a team that came up with it, right? But I'm pretty sure Ambition just like literally copied the strat of Obey Alliance here, and it was just running the exact same thing, and they beat them at it. Even though it was really close, right? But it's interesting to see that that Ambition just manages to pull this off. That's crazy.
It was incredibly ballsy to redo your full route and copy the team, the other team that you were going to play on there. That is a very ambitious move, I think some would say.
Well, I think it's also a humble move, you know? I mean, if somebody has a better strategy than you, you're not going to be arrogant about it. You're going to say, well, let's just do that. Let's just do it better than they are, right? I think that goes as like a testament to every good team willing to learn from their opponents and absorb as much knowledge as they possibly can. And I'm particularly excited about Mists coming up next, Ratnos, because when we saw both of these teams go against each other, they had to go, and of course, let's preface this by saying that the maze is random, but it's the same for both teams. So where they end up, which mini bosses that they have to fight, and even the length of the dungeon can vary a little bit here. And last time, both the teams low-rolled and had to deal with the dragon on a bolstered week, which was just a nightmare. So now, we don't really know where they're going to go this time, and it could be much faster as a result.
Yeah, that element of maze, as you said, the two teams are going to have the same maze, but which one it is, it's interesting, right? Because in theory, you know, a bad maze should be fine, right? Because it's like the other team has to deal with it as well. So it's hard to say, like, what would actually be better for one of these teams. In fact, maybe it's a case of like, oh, we ended up practicing this one a lot more just because that's one that happened to come up for us in practice, and like, that's the one that we want to show up. And maybe it's a case also of like, we're more comfortable with our cooldowns coming up 2 minutes earlier or later. And so we'd rather have the shorter or longer maze paths. I don't know. I'm very interested to see how that will affect things. I think, though, that largely the two teams are going to be able to find similar time in the maze. I think a lot is going to come down to boss execution, to that first pull of the dungeon, and to the final stretch of trash before the last boss. I think those parts are hugely important for this dungeon.
And just speaking on to like that first boss and that first pull, Ambition had such a monumental lead coming out of the first boss yesterday versus Obey Alliance. And Obey Alliance was actually able to claw it back through the maze through just better bolstering management and just slightly better play. And while the maze is, like you said, random, but it's like the same between the two teams, making sure that you do have like a good presence of mind to understand which bolstering packs you really can pull into one another, and just making sure that you don't have absolutely massive guardians running at you with 10 stacks of bolstering can absolutely save or cost you a lot of time.
Yeah, it can. And like you mentioned, just the difference in skill between the teams in dealing with the dragon. For example, dragon being hugely difficult to deal with because it's got the healing puddle, because it's had so much HP. You have to watch for any of the frontals that are going around. Some of the areas, you know, that you're going to be able to grab mobs through the maze and be able to bring them in more easily. It's also going to add more variance between what mobs that you're grabbing and how you have to deal with the interrupts onto it. So it's hugely difficult for a lot of these guys to be able to balance all the different things that they need to practice and be able to execute flawlessly against an opponent which has been just running neck and neck with them the entire way. So this is going to be the rematch here in Mist of Tyrannus Scythe. Ambition is 1 win away from going to the group finals and qualifying for our global finals as well. Game number 2 right now between Obey Alliance and Ambition taking place here in Mist of Tyrannus Scythe.
Yeah, and I'm actually excited to see if either of those teams maybe switch something up, because when they played against each other last time in Mists, there was a 2 seconds difference only. 2 seconds in favor of Obey Alliance. So I wonder if they decide, you know what, we think if we play perfectly, we're going to have a better strat, or if they thought about the fact that both those strats or routes are so close to each other, they maybe have to look for some improvements here or there. But when we look at the comp, they definitely kept the comp the same. You can still see both of them are playing that full physical damage comp, and we still see that Lightforged Draenei racial for Skylarked. Interesting. So definitely some similarities to their last route. They are probably just really confident in that comp and in that route that they're doing.
Yeah, we have the rarely seen tank. Actually, both of them have chosen some exciting ones. Nerf is on the Mecha Gnome, which is actually a pretty strong choice racial-wise. You get this effect where when you fall below 20% health, you heal for 15% of your max health. It can only happen once every 2.5 minutes, but still, that is actually a pretty strong effect. Sort of cheat death-ish if you know aren't too picky.
Yeah, it looks like both of them are dealing with those bow breakers. Now, the reason why they're dealing with those by themselves first is, of course, because we have bolstering. So they're just trying to get them a little bit lower while they're picking up those mushrooms, the stat buff as well. They also try to pick them up while the AoE is happening. So they just, because as soon as you pick up a mushroom, your HP just heals to full. So that's why you can see 40 just standing there in the back, next to these mushrooms, making sure he picks them up as soon as he drops low. And once they are a bit lower, they're gonna pull the rest of this trash on top of them, and then also this Tormentor Arcalet, as you can see as well. So lots of damage coming out in the group here, and lots of interrupts they need to do to make sure none of these Spirit Bolts or these Harvest Essences are going through.
Yeah, this is such a scary pull here with bolstering and explosive and a bunch of very deadly group-wide damage hits, especially if Incinerator isn't carefully interrupted. Does look like Ambition have done a better job. Look at the size of those Bow Breakers on the side of Obey Alliance. Wow. They've gotten them taken care of, though. This Soul Weaver, though, does love to heal if you don't stop it from autoing the tank when it does give itself that buff. So Ambition have finished off this pull a couple of seconds ahead of where Obey Alliance are at. They are now going to be getting started with their boss, but actually, both teams are going to be engaging the boss within a second of each other. So again, these two teams are just so well matched here, and this whoever comes out the victor in this series is going to be so deserving of that ticket, and whoever loses is going to be such a scary opponent in that last stand tournament because they both look so strong right now.
Yes, definitely. I mean, just how close that Sanguine Depths was, and how close even their match before this was in the upper bracket, where Obey Alliance just barely came out ahead. Both of those teams are just so incredibly good, and now you can see both of them are on Ingra. Neither of the teams actually putting a lot of damage onto the boss itself. They definitely focus on the Droman here, and Ambition getting to the 20% quite a lot quicker. They're already in that extra damage phase, and now we're gonna have to keep an eye on that HP. See if they can one-face the boss. It shouldn't be a problem for them, but if they don't manage to meet that damage check, then that's going to be a huge time loss.
Ambition got some really fortunate RNG here. They got a couple of explosive spawns right at the start of this burn phase, and they're running that bolstering anima power, so they actually got a nice damage increase as a result of that, and because of that, they're able to kill this boss nice and quickly there. Incredibly good play all around, but Obey Alliance have also done a great job of getting Ingram Malik quite low here. They are going to have to still finish it off, but this is low enough they won't have to do another phase for sure, and they will be finished here. Yeah, something like 20 seconds behind Ambition, 25 seconds. So actually quite a big lead for Ambition in the scale of these two teams, given how close they've been keeping things, but certainly not insurmountable. And the bolstering maze has plenty of opportunities to lose that much time in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm actually having a deja vu because I'm pretty certain this is exactly the same thing that happened last time that they played Mists. Ambition was quite a bit faster in that first boss, but then Obey Alliance somehow dealt with this maze quicker. I think mainly, like Tattles mentioned earlier, it was the bolstering management. Obey Alliance just dealt with bolstering so well, so they barely ever wasted any time on that extra HP that the mobs got from bolstering. So interesting to see if the same thing is going to happen again, or if Ambition is going to just improve their bolstering management and keep their lead.
Yeah, you can see Obey Alliance actually having some defenders here that are quite large. Skylark being forced to leap away from that. Both teams, though, are going to be making their way into the second room. Are they? Yeah, they are. Okay, the second room starting off here for Obey Alliance. Still about 20 seconds, I would say, separating them as they are getting started with this pull. Ambition making quick work of everything as well. This is quite tricky with bolstering because those defenders naturally have more health than the other targets. So if you're just evenly AoEing, you will quite often experience what's happening for Ambition right now, where the two defenders are the last ones to stay alive. What you want to do ideally is put some focused damage into those defenders.
Oh no, Ambition actually made a mistake with the maze. So it looks like they went into the wrong door, and this is their 20 seconds lead all gone. It looks like they just got the wrong one. Now they finally found the correct one, I believe, as Nerf is right in front of that door. But this is the chance that the Obey Alliance needed to get back into this game. That 20 seconds advantage, it's all gone now, as Obey Alliance is fighting that next trash bag already.
Yeah, and you can see both teams getting some extra trash, joining these pulls. This is so sketchy with bolstering active. You can see on the side of Obey Alliance some very large ghosts here. But again, they've been doing just such a good job of getting everything low enough that it's really not lasting too long, even once it has 7 stacks of bolstering. Ambition, though, are also working on this same pull. For them, you can see the bowstring has gone a lot worse. I mean, look at the size of that Mist Veil Defender. Maybe we actually had a tender cast go off here, because on the side of Ambition, I mean, this is catastrophic, what you are looking at on the right-hand side of the screen. This is 30 seconds more time just killing these two mobs that are full health with a million bowstring stacks.
This is where the full Night Elf comp that we saw Complexity run would be incredibly handy, right? Because we saw Complexity run that Rest Druid comp where they were playing full Night Elves, and in case something does go wrong with bowstring, then you have that option to just completely use Shadow Melt on the whole group, de-aggro the mobs, get the bowstring stacks off of the mobs, and then fight them again. That would definitely have been a better option than having to fight through all of these bowstring stacks as the Ambition having to do now. But obviously they don't play that Night Elf comp, so they can't do that, and they have to finish off those bowstring mobs, and you can see just how long it took them. Obey Alliance, on the other hand, they're already into the next maze, fighting this Gorger. They also managed to pull some extra trash on top once the Gorger was a little bit lower. They still need to make sure they're focusing the Gorger quite a bit, because it has a lot of HP, and it keeps jumping around as well. So it just jumps out of those AoE effects that they have on the ground. But it looks like they're not doing a good job at all with the bowstring management, because all of the other mobs around the Gorge Galadar just died.
Yeah, Boo here is a lot of the work on this, right? Is the eviscerates into the big Toad. Ambition have actually done a good job of catching up here. They are also working on this Toad, and it's a little bit higher health, but it's not much higher health than what Obey Alliance are working with here. So actually, yeah, Ambition maybe 20 seconds behind? I don't know. This is so close. These two teams are just having these back and forth moments where one team or the other is losing time. Obey Alliance actually having to do this puzzle, and they needed to take a little bit of extra time there because they weren't quite sure which way they needed to go. So again, if Ambition have figured that out innocently during this pull, that will be another opportunity for them to save a tiny bit more time. And you can see they already have a world marker down. They don't need to spend any more time activating those obelisks and figuring out which one it is. So yeah, 20 seconds at most separating these teams. Now you can see Onesie sending his pet on a little adventure to bring some more friends into this pull. One of the joys of the hunter in this dungeon, the pet can just sneak on through those mist walls as if they don't exist and help you grab a couple more of the mobs from the other wings.
Yeah, the pets definitely are the MVP of these dungeon runs here in Mist. Obey Alliance dealing with this trash bag pretty well, actually. It looks like they managed to pretty evenly kill them off, so not a lot of bowstring HP that they had to go through. Ambition also looking pretty good. There's one Shaper, it looks like, that is still a bit high HP. So Obey Alliance definitely doing a little bit of a better job dealing with bowstring in this last pack, as they're already going into Mistcaller now, having that Ashen Hollow popped as well. And look at the trash percentage. Obey Alliance 89%, while Ambition is on 77%. So a huge difference in favor of Obey Alliance here.
You can see right at the start of this boss fight as well, those little cups of tea flying through the air anytime Lagbug hits Ashen Hallow. That's the Venthyr, one of the Theatar Soulbind abilities, giving everybody else versatility when you hit your Ashen Hallow. A nice little bonus on that thing, but it does look pretty ridiculous.
I definitely like some tea thrown at my head to gain some versatility right there. As Obey Alliance is now dealing with the intermission phase. Actually, they're already out of the intermission. Yeah, and I mean, look, that trash percentage difference, I wonder, I guess Obey Alliance just pulled a lot more trash in the maze through those walls with that Hunter pet. Well, Ambition, maybe because they had those issues with the heal going through of the Tender and having to deal with those two really bolstered mobs. Maybe that's why they didn't do the maze like they usually do. But this is going to mean that Ambition has to do a lot more trash after this boss. Probably going to have to deal with that trash in 2 pulls rather than 1 like Obey Alliance. But we have to see, because Ambition is doing like an insane pull somehow and getting all of the trash in like 1 pull, then it might not actually be that big of a difference. But Obey Alliance just pretty far ahead in the boss time too, as they're already in that last phase.
Yeah, you can see Obey Alliance getting close to that 10% mark here. They have that last guessing game cast coming out. Ambition, meanwhile, have just started with their phase, so definitely a time and count advantage going towards Obey Alliance here. Ambition really have their work cut out for them as we will enter the final bit of the dungeon here. They need to make a massive pull work, and they need to make it work while also gaining time relative to Obey Alliance on a smaller pull. That is going to be so tough to do. Ambition now entering their last intermission as Obey Alliance have finished off the boss, now just waiting for this little bit of RP to finish before they can get downstairs and get started with the end of the dungeon. They really do have such a small amount of trash left to deal with. 11% means they can skip a lot of the different stuff between them and the last boss. They just need to do one medium-sized pull and then the boss, and they will be done with their dungeon.
Yeah, it looks like they're just using the sap here from the rogue to make sure they're not aggroing this pack, and now they still have that shroud available to go past the rest of the packs because they really don't need that much. You can see that 11% on the board. They might not even be pulling everything at once because there's some larvae they can pull at the very end. Once they're done with the boss, they can just do that. We've seen a lot of teams opt into that one, as Obey Alliance seems to be pulling those two packs right in front of the boss together. Not even, I mean, of course it's bowstring, so they can't pull it into the boss. So they're gonna have to deal with this one first. It looks like the damage is pretty even. Definitely don't want to have any huge bowstring stacks here go off on any of those Gorgers, but perfect. That was actually really well done. That was such a clean bowstring execution here by Obey Alliance. And now they're at 100%, only the boss left.
Yeah, all they have to do is avoid a Tredova disaster, which we have seen happen to a couple of teams here, but as long as they can stay clean, they should be in good shape. Great job by stacking everybody up, minimizing how much space they're going to lose in this room to those green puddles. And as long as they just do that every time, they should be okay. Yeah, they do need to be a little bit careful, though, of course, because the other mechanics are going to prevent that. And once they start having more and more swirlies, that's going to be scary. Oh, Lagbug is creating one of the zoomer puddles there with the freedom while he's running away there. So next time we get that cast, he may try and take out one of his teammates if they're not careful. This is kind of sketchy. The boss has so much health here on Tyrannical as well.
Yeah, this is definitely going to take them a while to chew through all of this health right after those cooldowns are dropping. Now the boss drops pretty quickly because of that Bloodlust, because of the Ashen, everything being used. But once those cooldowns run out, it's going to take them a while to finish it off. And of course we have that 50% slow plus the 50% physical damage increase in everybody. So the tank is going to take more damage, but also the group members are going to be taking more damage from those larvae that spawn and melee attack whoever they're fixating on. So that is also something you have to look out for. Lagbug just using that bubble, making sure he can run as fast as possible to make sure the green puddles are really separated so he can maybe snipe one of his team members whenever they spawn next time. And now they're going apart with those mindlings. And yeah, the boss dropping pretty fast for Tredova here.
Look at the speed of some of those puddles that Lagbug has created. This is truly unethical behavior coming out from Obey Alliance, but it doesn't seem like they're going to be necessarily punished for it. Oh, it's kind of a sketchy mind link coming out here, and soon they will have the next set of swirlies. Lagbug has to be careful here. He's taking a lot of autos. A great fear coming out from Skylark, though, and this is the hardest dodge left to the fight. They've done it. Now the boss at 5% and falling as long as they can avoid some kind of disaster, and they have done it. Tredova goes down. Obey Alliance evening up the series here, 1-1 against Ambition.
There it is, Obey Alliance taking that victory in Mists. And again, just such clean runs from both of these teams. But when it comes down to that maze and comes down to some of those early pulls like you talked about before this game got started, Settles, Obey Alliance just rolling on through.
Dude, that maze was really bad for Ambition. It's exactly like I was talking about. Oh yes, first boss, casual 30-second advantage. Maze, Ambition, terrible bowstring management, and Obey Alliance was able to just completely claw it all the way back because of that maze.
Yeah, and that's always a good example too to start going through, is that when Ambition was looking at Sanguine Depths, Nagura immediately learned their lesson, adopted a new strategy, adopted their opponent's strategy, and just did it better. Here, you're not necessarily able to just yoink somebody's strategy because of how the maze changes, and then just the practice that is required to be able to perfect bolstering management, pulling the mobs through the walls, equalizing the health pool and everything. Ambition still just wasn't quite able to get it, and it's one of those invisible affixes that we sort of talked about that, well, is a very visible affix, but sort of just steals away your time bit by bit.
Yeah, and it's really hard to find a big time advantage in a dungeon like Mists, because there's such few things you can really do to do bigger pulls or go harder or whatever, especially when it's bolstering. You can't just say, oh, we're just gonna do this risky pull where we pull stuff on top of the boss. You can't do that, right? So it's definitely hard to find things to increase your efficiency and to shave some time off of your dungeon clear. And on top of that, if you make any sort of mistake, we saw Ambition just, making a mistake with the mace and then making a mistake with that heal that went through, and then you're not going to win against the Bay Alliance anymore that have a clean run on their side. Both of those teams are just performing so incredibly well, and they cannot even have any of those smaller mistakes. They just have to play perfectly to be able to win.
Yeah, they really do. Settles, let's start going through this dungeon. I mean, it was quick here, but let's talk about those little time differentials you've been pointing out.
Yeah, it was very quick, and we're not talking about the new Blizzard precedent. So first off, we have this Arcolith pull. We have this first incinerator Arcolith pull with the bow breakers. Ambition is able to get something around the range of like a 10 to 15 second advantage just by having slightly better damage on that pack. And then on top of this, they get their Ingram Malloc somewhere in the range of like 5 to 10% lower. And that allows them to just get that 30-second advantage coming out of the first boss like I was talking about. And then the maze starts. And this is probably the biggest fiesta that we've seen, where you have Ambition hitting the wrong door, and that is by itself probably like something probably in the range of like a 15 to 20 second penalty, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 25 seconds. And that was not the issue. The issue occurred whenever that heal went off. Look at this. This is where they lost probably, I don't even know, a minute to this 8-stack bolstered double defender. All the while, you have Obey Alliance getting 89% of their count from this maze. They come out of the Mist Collar at 89% enemy forces, which is so much count, where they only have one trash pack left to do. And their bolstering management for doing that much trash through the maze was absolutely pristine and absolutely perfect, and that was what allowed them to even up the series 1-1 over Ambition.
Yeah, I mean, I feel good when we get through the maze at like 56, 60%, something like that, but they are almost 89. At 90%. Just everybody doing everything to grab all those mobs throughout the maze. So very well played by that. And now we start setting our sights here, Dratnos. Last dungeon, it's going to be Necrotic Wake.
Indeed, it is. This is one of our most technically intensive dungeons as well. And it's an interesting series as well, because I believe the Sanguine Depths and the Mist were already played by these two teams against each other, but the Necrotic Wake has not got that distinction, which means that we will potentially have an opportunity for one of these teams to have a strategy that is unknown or better than what the other team is up to, and maybe capitalize on that. I suspect that it's not going to come down to that, though. I suspect it's going to come down to execution. This is such a difficult dungeon to execute well. The affixes are not very impactful on the hard parts of this dungeon this week, but the dungeon itself is just so tricky to get everything to work out well.
I think that Obey Alliance has like a really uphill battle to fight in the Necrotic Wake, just because they would have had very little reason to practice for it unless they were intentionally practicing for the lower final. They wouldn't have like sunk infinite time into Necrotic Wake, where Ambition has already played it twice this weekend, and we know that their Necrotic Wake time is so incredibly fast. So unless Obey Alliance surprises us for the 6th time this weekend, then I expect that they
would never.
Maybe haven't put. They would never surprise us for one more time.
Fool me 5 times.
Every time we keep counting them out, they find some sort of way to surprise. And, Tettles, we've been talking about these reverse sweeps all the time, Obey Alliance is just, they're consistently moving to prove themselves. We talked about Ambition having like a chip on their shoulder, but, man, if any of the Obey Alliance guys have been listening to our commentary and everything like that, Nagura, I feel like they got to have a pretty big chip on their shoulder after all this weekend.
I think so as well. I mean, we definitely, because they had changed 3 of their players, we maybe thought, they might need a little bit of time to get back into it, get some synergy back as well. And then on top of that, they also got the 9th seed in the time trials, right? So that's a big reason why we thought that, right? Because Obey Alliance definitely was a team that was to be expected to have a higher seed coming out of the time trials. So we assumed, oh, it's because they changed the 3 players, so maybe, you know, it's not going too well. But now they're definitely showing up, and you can see just how good they are. And it's just very close between those two teams, and it can go either way. Of course, we saw Necrotic Wake already being played by Ambition, having
big
no.
props to the GG WoW, the Golden Guardians World of Warcraft teams are as they are, of course, sponsoring Ambition throughout their MDI performance, and they are also sponsoring Incarnation. But man, those mazes can be tricky, you know.
Tough.
But it's always a healer job, you know. Always a healer job. So
Blame Ellesmere.
Yep, absolutely. Game number 3 is getting ready between Obey Alliance and Ambition. Obey, of course, has had multiple reversed sweeps throughout this weekend. They've had time and time again surpassed expectations, time and time again performed at such a crazy high level. They're full of veterans, both of the MDI and of the high key pushing scene, and they're going to need this win, as Ambition will as well, if they hope to make it to our global finals. It's all coming down to this game right now here in Necrotic Wake.
And then we've got big pulls right off the bat here for both teams, and some different compositions as well. Lagbug on the Disc Priest, which is pretty common in this dungeon, but Ambition actually running Ellesmere on the Holy Paladin here as well. And look at the Ashen Hallow as well on this first pull. Incredible extra bit of value from that spec, but that means they won't have the mind control for later. Both teams have done so much trash here into Blightbone. Oh my goodness.
Okay, this is absolutely crazy pull from the get-go by both of these teams. And yeah, a little bit of a difference in comp here. So their Ambition is going to have the advantage of having the higher DPS healer on their side, but Obey Alliance maybe has like the higher DPS combination of the damage dealers, right? So maybe it's not gonna give and take it so much in the difference of these compositions. We're gonna have to see if it makes a difference later on. But it looks like so far Ambition definitely has a little bit more boss DPS. As you can see, Blightbone being quite a bit lower for Ambition, while they just continue to pull trash on top of this boss with those Kirin orbs that they just picked up from that Goliath.
Both teams are on a world tour here. They started this boss with a bunch of trash, and now they're pulling more trash and the Incinerator onto the final 50% of this boss's health. This is going to be huge, and both teams, I think, are going to come out of this at right around the same time, with right around the same count and progression through the dungeon. So again, just so well matched are these two teams, and the difference in composition is going to be so interesting as well as we keep going through the dungeon. They do both have that priest again for the mind control, yes, so it's just a question of the other stuff around it, whether it's better to have that priest as your healer or on the DPS side of things. Ambition have finished this first boss 6 seconds ahead of where Obey Alliance are at, and both teams have the exact same trash count.
I wonder if we're going to see a difference in strat here, because we know Ambition is skipping past all of this, and it looks like Obey Alliance is not. Obey Alliance is activating that steward, picking up those orbs, and now they're actually doing a pull here. So yeah, definitely a little bit of a difference here. Obey Alliance think that they have another route that might just be faster than the one that we saw from Ambition. Ambition immediately going through, pulling these Marauders with the Necromancers. Actually wonder if this was a mistake. Didn't they usually pull those Marauders with the next pull? I might be mistaken here, actually. Maybe they always did this. I might be wrong. As they're now picking up those Kirin orbs, or just waiting for the steward to repair the Goliath and then picking up the Kirin orbs. And they're gonna be gearing up for our huge pull just in a second.
Obey Alliance on a much more standard path through this dungeon, killing off all this trash using those Kyrian Goliath orbs, and they actually still have another Kyrian Goliath they can use, whereas Ambition just skipped one entirely. They need to get all their count from this massive pull, including the skeletal monstrosity here, and they don't have nearly as many resources to deal with this. Ashen Hallow not available for another minute. Sack is going to be used here by Ellesmere, everybody dropping very low, but instantly topped after that big AoE damage from the monstrosity. They did a really good job of not pushing it through into raging before that finished as well. Obey Alliance, meanwhile, they've started their boss RP, and they are also working on this pull that Ambition did earlier, but they don't need any more count after this one. They'll be able to go right into the boss pretty much.
Yeah, so interesting differences here. Obey Alliance definitely a little bit slower with this pull in particular because their rogue was activating the boss, so he just now got back to the group. So basically missing one damage dealer on their side as they're now picking up those Kyrian orbs. They can be using the Kyrian orbs now for possibly Varuth and the boss. I wonder if this is the strategy here, because Ambition dealing with Varuth by himself, but if you have that extra healing from that buff from the orbs, it might actually be possible for a Bay Alliance to do the boss and the Tormentor at the same time, and that looks like what they're gonna be doing. So yeah, caught up again for a Bay Alliance in a difference in strategy, or even pulling the Necromancer too.
This is so sketchy, but they have access to those weapons as well. If they want to send a spear on this, maybe they could, and it would maybe help finish everything off, or maybe they're just going to rely on the Kyrian Goliath orbs, doing a tremendous amount of extra bonus damage and healing there. They've got to be careful as mobs enter that raging threshold. The power word barrier is going to come out, and soon they're going to see the first Army of the Dead as well that needs to be dealt with from the boss. Okay, they've already dealt with that. They're vibing. All right, Obey Alliance making something that is so difficult look so good, and they've actually gained some time here. They've gained some boss damage as a result of all this as well compared to Ambition, and they're going to be finishing this boss first unless Ambition really accelerate from here.
Wow, I really like this strategy by Obey Alliance. That is so incredibly smart. Just having this orb damage to be able to not lose a lot of time with Varuth, because that was actually the only, like, quote-unquote inefficient pull that Ambition was doing, this Varuth, this Tormentor, by himself. But because Amarth does so much AoE damage, they just didn't want to risk pulling it with the boss. But making up for that risk by having those Kyrian orbs just makes so much sense. And now you can see Obey Alliance and Ambition, they have the same trash percentage, so both of them can immediately go up to the Necropolis, but Obey Alliance just dealing with this boss a little bit quicker, still not that far behind. It's a 10 seconds difference on the board now in favor of Obey Alliance.
Yeah, this is going to be so close, but Ambition have an Ashen Hallow. They have the Silver Bullet. The last thing they might need to make a massive pull work out up here. Let's see if they can use it in combination with that depleted Anima Orb. First, though, it's going to be Obey Alliance, and Obey Alliance are also, they are going to pull the entire room. Both teams are going to pull the entire room here. Let's see how this works out. This is so scary. Look at all that trash.
And there's actually a difference in weapons that they still have available. I actually think it's in favor of Obey Alliance. They have 2 Anima Orbs still, one on the Rogue, one on the Skylark, and then they also have 2 Spears left as well still. It looks like they barely used any weapons before this, while Ambition, they did commit one of their orbs previously. So they have 1 less Anima Orb on their side, and you can see that Obey Alliance dealing with this really quickly because of those Anima Orbs that they committed. You can see the Spear is still on the Rogue's back here on Obey Alliance, while Ambition had used their Spear for that pull that they just did.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. Obey Alliance still in the lead by a couple of seconds. Ambition are getting started on this trash gauntlet as well. So both teams at a very similar spot in the dungeon. And a lot of it is going to come down to execution here. Ambition have actually pulled this Fleshcrafter into this pull as well to get these extra throw cleavers involved. I don't see Obey Alliances on the screen, so maybe it's still crowd controlled off over to the side right now as they are working now on their last assistance. Ambition making very short work of these 2 mobs as they both enter raging range. Here comes pull 2 though for Ambition, or for Obey Alliance over on the left-hand side, and they actually have that cleaver not CC'd, but they've left it all out at the side so it doesn't accidentally get cleaved down. Ambition, meanwhile, they've actually put their Fleshcrafter into raging range, and now they're going to leave it crowd controlled for a little bit and let it heal back up, but it's going to stay raging. Even though it's healing from the polymorph, the raging effect does not go away when you get back above 30%. It stays on forever unless it gets soothed off.
Yeah, so they're definitely taking advantage of that raging. Obey Alliance doesn't seem to be doing that on their side. They just, actually now they got it into raging range as well. Okay, so they just got it into that pull with that gore grind and managed to get it into raging 2, as they are now engaging that last pack, the Rot Spew, before they get into the last boss. And look at the time, 8 minutes into the dungeon, and they're already about to pull that 3rd boss of the dungeon. This is so quick. Both of these teams are just speeding through this dungeon with 2 different routes, and both of them so close to each other. Obey Alliance still a couple of seconds ahead because of the different kind of route that they were doing with those Kyrian orbs, and it really seems to be paying off so far. We also see the rogues actually using that shift to make sure they dispel the raging of these rot spears to make sure that tanks don't suffer so much from those mutilates and tenderizes.
Yeah, this is such a scary moment here for Obey Alliance, but they have now got this last the last boss here, the second to last boss rather, is being pulled by them, and they have a spear available for it if they want. So maybe they'll decide to commit it. It's pretty common to see it used on this boss fight. The Ring of Peace there is going to be used to move the Fleshcrafter exactly where they want it. And here comes that meat hook, pulling Surgeon Stitchflesh down. Let's see just how much damage they can burn into this, as Ambition have gotten started with the exact same boss.
Yeah, they use the spear, so Obey Alliance has one spear for this boss that they just committed, and then they have one extra spear on the mage that they still have available for the last boss as well. So many weapons still left, and you can see just how much damage they have. Look at Surgeon Stitchflesh for Obey Alliance. The boss is just absolutely melting, and it's already down. Less than 10 minutes in the dungeon, and they're already on the way to the last boss with another spear available. This is just an absolutely insane strategy by Obey Alliance. They're just speeding through this dungeon. This is incredible.
They're getting started now with that last boss. Soon that Fleshcrafter will be teleporting up to join them as well. And they now have... Actually, they don't even have Bloodlust available. Bloodlust still 10 seconds away. They used it right at the start of the dungeon, but we've only just passed the 10-minute mark. And my bet is that they will hit that button right when it comes off cooldown. But Ambition are hot on their heels. They are getting started with this boss as well. And they will have Bloodlust and Ashen Hallow and Wings available as well. Obey Alliance do not have those buttons available for their comp. So if Ambition can use those to their advantage, maybe they can claw back this extra boss health difference between the two teams. Right now, something like 20 seconds of advantage towards Obey Alliance. Let's see if Ambition can claw that back, though. As you can see, every single cooldown in the game is being used by both teams here to just try and kill this boss as quickly as possible.
It looked like 40 was not able to use his Shadow Melt to skip that exile, so he was actually sent down pretty early, and it took them quite a while to get that Fleshcrafter up. It looked like he was not snapping up to them for quite a while, but now they do have it up on both sides, but they have to claw through the HP of the Fleshcrafter too, because not only do they need to kill the boss, they also need to kill the Fleshcrafter. Astronaut going down for Ambition, that's going to be 5 seconds on the board. They need to use a Battle Rest to get him back up, and those 5 seconds might actually matter. The Fleshcrafter is a little bit lower for Ambition, so they have to go through less HP compared to Obey Alliance, but Obey Alliance is just so much lower on the boss, because they reached that boss much quicker and they had that extra weapon.
Yeah, they are doing such a good job here. The timer will not end when the boss dies, however. They have to finish off that Fleshcrafter as well, so they need to make sure that they don't let up now, and you can see they're AoEing everything down. The boss is going to die here, and so is that Fleshcrafter. The timer stops, and Obey Alliance have earned their ticket to the Global Finals.
Every time there's any sort of doubt in the minds of any casters, Obey Alliance just puts that to bed with another reverse sweep, taking the victory, qualifying for our MDI Global Finals, and earning themselves the right to battle against Complexity for that #1 seeding spot. Man, they're so good. Title's just... These games are just so good between Obey Alliance and their opponents.